Okay, fine. Okay, this is the first workshop that we've had in a long time. We're going to get started. Let's start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a quorum. We'll call this meeting to order. There was a confirmation of proper meeting notice, and I did not write down like what I usually do. The thing that we always say about yeah, that you can't record anything and all that. I usually had that for the board meeting. I was thinking this was more of a workshop, so I don't have that written down, but I'll try to ad-lib it since I don't have it in front of me. That the board, the policy of Legacy is that while people can, record things themselves or whatever, they're not allowed to post it on social media or anything like that without the express written approval of the board and the CAM. So I'd like to start out by saying that a few things. This is a workshop. This is not a board meeting. The last time we've had a workshop was almost 2 years ago. They were always informal, more or less a way that the board can just talk about different issues. The public was always invited, but before, they were never allowed to speak. I was just recently informed a few days ago that the correct way is to allow people to speak after something is discussed. Now, the difference between a board meeting and a workshop is that this is supposed to be more informal. We are just discussing things that are on this agenda. We are not making any motions whatsoever, and we are not voting at all. The few other things I wanted to say, that is, if you signed up, you have 3 minutes to speak, and we will get tougher on keeping it to 3 minutes. We've gotten a little bit lax the last few meetings, and we're returning to a better decorum that we're going to stay close to that 3 minutes. If you want to speak, you have to sign up. The sign-up sheet is right there. If you haven't already, quickly do that. We will also not be entertaining any cat calls or any people yelling from the audience. That's just disruptive and not respectful. So, that being said, we'll get started. So the first order of business that we're informally discussing today are board objectives. Any of the board want to start?
Frank, would you give the background as to what we did?
Okay, speak into the microphone, please. Sure.
Yeah, if you would just give the background so that everybody understands how this came to pass and what we're doing today.
Sure. So, previous boards have put together a ranking of objectives that we would have in the 2022-2023 year. Those were as many pages of them. They were very well done. Then the board was sent these to rank them. And the board collectively ranked to the most important to the least important. And so since then, this was done a while ago, since then some of these things have been done, some of these things might be great ideas, some of these things might not be as important. More recently, Barb and Chris were charged with the responsibility of updating these, and I know they did that and they went above and beyond. And so now we're discussing those ranking results. Is that all right, Ed?
No, that's good, thanks. So I guess we should hear from Chris.
You want to hear from me first? Okay. Well, the very first thing that the highest ranking, pretty much everybody said this was our highest priority. Everyone rated at exactly the same high. Corrective and preventive community maintenance / schedule plan. So that's something that we need to do. We've talked about doing it weekly, monthly, quarterly, 6 months, yearly. And it makes a lot of sense, but now the next thing is, how are we going to do it? So, I'm going to pass that right now and go to one of the other things, which was farther down the line about committees. Before, we used to have what was called a planning committee here. Planning committee did things such as this right here. So if we had a planning committee, we could turn to the planning committee and say, do this. And we could say, we're going to give you 3 months or 4 months, but we don't have a planning committee. It seems along the way that we've slowly but surely pushed our committees aside. And that's, like I said, I'm going to talk about that first, committees. 12 years ago, 2009, when we started out, we had 12 standing committees. Why did we have so many? Because Pringle didn't care, because Pringle was in charge, and they said, you can have all the committees you want, but we're not going to give you any money. So that's how it started. Once we took over as the first board of directors in 2009, we realized we had too many committees. So we cut it down to 6. Through the years, those committees, to begin with, the committee chairs had to come to board meetings and report at the beginning of the board meetings. And it would take 2 to 3 minutes for each committee to go through, and that would take about 15 to 20 minutes. Well, along the way, it was decided that, gosh, that took too much time at a board meeting, so we're going to do away with that. We'll just have the committees do a report. Well, it didn't last very long because committees realized very quickly nobody was reading the reports. So they stopped doing them. And of course, the board of directors didn't enforce it. Now, I'm not blaming just recently. This is something that took a while to get done. This was not something that just happened overnight. It was several years. And the reason I'm explaining this is for the new people here and for the people on Channel 17 that are watching that don't know the history of this community. The committees were very vital at the beginning. The reason why the board of directors gave them direction, things to do to help the board so the board didn't have to do everything. And that worked fairly well for a few years. But like I said, slowly but surely, things were eroded. First, we don't want you to report at board meetings. So people stopped listening to what the committees were doing. And then pretty soon, in a couple more years, the board stopped listening to the committees. Because they were being ignored by everybody else, why should we listen? For instance, the ENC has been telling us for years that we had issues with our trails and with our ponds. And we didn't listen too well. So now we're spending a lot of money getting our trails back up to shape where they should have been. But if we'd done a little bit along the way, they wouldn't be in the shape they're in today if we listened to the committee. But once again, the board of directors, we didn't listen. And I say we because I'm part of that issue. Even though I wasn't on the board, I am now, so that means I'm part of the Legacy Board of Directors. So, we have come to the point today where I think, and copies have already been given to the rest of the board, that we should have 6 standing committees. Now, one thing else I found out while I was doing all this, and I've looked back to confirm, and I hope somebody can tell me differently, but about a year or so ago, when the Sports and Fitness and the Planning Committee said, thank you very much, but we don't need you anymore, the Space Planning Committee was started. Well, I looked back through all our minutes, and there's nothing in the minutes anywhere that says there's a space planning committee. So I looked further on our board, on our Legacy board, and we don't have a space planning committee. We've got a building committee.
That's correct.
And I see nowhere in our minutes where we've changed, and I say we, the board of directors, have changed the space planning to building. And then last but not least, I have a copy of what the board did pass on February 16th, 2020, of 4 committees. No space planning, no building committee. So we've got a rogue committee out there that has no information on what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be doing it, and we've kind of gone to sleep, the board of directors. It's our fault, period. Because I am part of that issue now, because I've been on the board since last March. So these are things that we need to collectively take care of. And once again, that's why I'm talking about committees and rules. We need to go back to where we listen to the people, because that's the business of Legacy. It's the people here, the people on Channel 17 that live here. That's our job, and to make this community good. And when we forget that, and when we forget about our committees and what they can do for us, then we've got an issue. And I'm not trying to beat up everybody here, not at all. Don't get me wrong. We've just slowly but surely eroded what our committees can do for us. That's to help us to be better. Because there's people on those committees that are very passionate about their certain areas, whether it's ENC, whether it's the ARC, whether it's TNT. Thank you, Ralph. Those people are very, very focused on a certain area, which can help us because they know that area better than anybody else, better than any of us up here, and they can help us. But that's something that I really think we should take a look at. So there's some of these things here as far as, just a minute, I'm almost finished.
I hope, okay.
Yeah. Well, you said get started, so I'm gonna get started.
Yeah, I said get started, that's, you know.
Well, it's a
Let's
tool.
get better.
You guys should-
Player.
Yeah.
You guys should be talking to each other.
Yes.
I agree.
I know in the past, you guys have set the tables up where you face each other. We're trying to keep it a little more open.
Right.
Let's try and communicate together, not pander to each
Exactly.
other.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, we're not speaking to the audience, we're speaking to each other. This is a workshop. So let me just address a few things here. Let's get back on point. We are currently supposed to be talking about the Board of Directors ranking results. The first one was about community maintenance. I will say that Josh does this, and before Josh, it was Sherry. I've seen Sherry's maintenance plan, the whole spreadsheet, the Excel thing, and it's very good. For the past few weeks, Josh has been sending out weekly updates on what the maintenance here have done. So it's like you're asking for something that we already have, and they have it. So you can consider that put in the done list. That's done. I do want to point out that I take offense at you calling the Space Planning Committee a rogue committee. Whether you want to call it the Building Committee or the Space Planning Committee, it's actually on our website as the Building Committee. But that's semantics, whatever what you call it is so minute compared to the more important things that we're doing here. And whether you want to call it the Space Planning Committee or the Building Committee, we do have a specific objective that the board gave them. They've been working hard for 5 years so far, and we are right on the cusp of, getting this across the finish line. Next, this is getting off the agenda a little bit, but next week we will have those plans back from Powell. The Space Planning Committee will get those first, then the board will get them, and we'll quickly set up 2 town hall meetings to present the work to all of our residents to decide. They've worked hard for 5 years, and I don't think they should be called a rogue committee.
Frank, the one question I'm saying, it's not that I don't disagree with it, they've done a great job, but there's nothing anywhere that states, yes, we made this commitment, which we should be, it should be in our minutes, it's not. It's not whether we're space planning or building, that's what I'm getting at. The people out here,
Because
no, it's not.
I remember when they
In
were
the board
made
of
from a
directors meeting, you guys
change from an ad
objective
hoc to a
task.
standing committee.
We did, but it's not in the minutes, and that's what I'm talking, if it's not in the minutes, then there's nothing to go back to, and that's what I'm getting at. You're right, I was out there when President Hornsby said, space planning is a committee now, instead of an ad
So
hoc.
what do we do about it, Chris? What's the solution?
Well, as a board of directors, we've got to correct that.
How do we correct it?
Well, first off, we gotta say it is a committee, it's gotta be in the minutes, and we gotta put down in the committee charter what they're supposed to do.
So you do have the board pass the objectives and task list for the building committee, and this was within the last 4 months, I'd have to look at it. But that's in the minutes, the task list and objectives is on the website, so they are established with tasks and objectives, and you did solidify that they are the building committee. Now, the charter hasn't been updated, that probably should be done.
Yeah, there's no charter at all for that committee.
There is a task list and objectives, though.
I understand, yes, it's because we thought there was a charter, and when I was looking at everything else, there is no charter.
I think.
Ed, Mike,
Oh, yeah. Where I think we are with this, we do have a charter for committees.
Yeah,
I think, based on my recollection, that the committee that we have been calling either space planning or building planning, I believe that they have been operating largely, if not entirely, in accordance with that committee charter that we have. They've posted notices, they've permitted people to go to their meetings, they have even posted reports or minutes. I'm not sure, what you want to call it. But, okay, so they have, it's by de facto, they've been a committee and done their job, and they've turned over to, with our knowledge, they've turned over to the architect the plans, which, and Frank just mentioned, we're getting them back. So, what you've brought to the table is that reviewing the minutes, going back a couple of years, there wasn't an official charter, anointment. This is a committee.
correct.
Apparently, it was done without formality, is what it looks like, what it sounds like. But the fact is, they have been a committee, they have worked, they've done their job, and we're about to see the fruits of their labor. So what is the fix, is what I'm saying. Do we just now anoint the committee officially?
Let me interject that right now we're supposed to be talking about the board of directors ranking results. Let's get this back on point.
Well, that's right.
We're
That's
not
the first
talking
agenda.
about the legitimacy of the space planning or building committee.
Okay.
So the first thing here was about the maintenance plan. I think we could all agree that Josh does this and Sherry did this before. It's already done. It's pretty, I looked at it, it's really complex, it's really ornate, it's detailed is what I'm trying to say, and that's done. The second thing here, review the budget and spending of upcoming space planning building projects. And it says the board of directors should request the finance committee to complete a re-examination of the budget. That would probably be pertinent after we get these plans back and after we do the town hall meeting.
Question, Frank, do you plan to go through the 3 pages of the individual objectives?
We're supposed to talk about these.
Yeah.
I just want to keep it on point.
Well-
If we don't have to, we don't have
No,
to.
okay. Why I asked you if you were planning to talk about each one, and there must be 20 some of them. I thought what we would do here, we already know that 2 people, Barbara Howell and Chris, identified which one of these have been done.
Right, they said they spent 20 hours on this, and so if they want to go through this and just tell us what's been done, what hasn't been done, what shouldn't be done, or whatever, that's fine, but we shouldn't get right off the track on the first
I agree.
5 minutes of the meeting
No, I-
talking about the legitimacy of the space
I
planning
agree.
committee
And-
and the needs to make copious amounts of new committees.
Okay.
So, which other board member or what other boards felt wise to not even have anymore.
Don't
So,
we need to talk about prioritizing
yeah,
which ones of the remaining ones that haven't been done, prioritizing? And with respect to prioritizing, I think a question presented is, are we going to do that, or are we going to be designating a committee to do that?
In other words, I think if we go to the second part of that goals and objectives.
Be this one here.
Yeah, which tells what we have and haven't done, what we need to do.
So the job is to prioritize the remaining ones, and for me at least, the question presented here is, are we gonna do that at this meeting, or are we gonna be designating a committee to do that?
We're not
so that
making
we
any
don't have to-
decisions today at all. We're not making
No.
any motions, not making any
No,
voting.
no.
We're just discussing.
And I'm asking you what you think about this, right?
So Barb and Chris stated at the last board meeting they'd spent 20 hours working on this, and we appreciate their good work. And if you want to run down the fruits of that labor and bring us all up to speed, that's fine.
Okay.
And then we could discuss it after.
Gotcha. And I'll just, we'll come to the second part of this. Project planning. The goal was to have a consistent formula for project planning in our legacy community. The objective was to implement a structured procedure for project planning and development. The tactic, develop and maintain project plans for major community projects. This would include all aspects of the project, some which would be timelines, vendors, additional resources, financial barriers, and any additional strategic information.
It's what you're reading from.
Page one.
Page one.
Page one.
Okay,
Yeah, lower right hand side, page one.
gotcha.
You're on page two.
All right. That's why it didn't make sense.
I know, I'm sorry, I think maybe the last, there you go.
There it is. There
Oh.
it is.
Now we're all on the same page.
Thank you.
Anyway, the tactic was to appoint a project planning committee. That's the tactic for the project planning. Second thing was communication. Goal was communication enhancements for the BOD. Objective was to develop and deploy a consistent communication strategy that will reach all residents with pertinent information on happenings in Legacy. The tactic, appoint a communication/marketing committee. Another tactic, develop and deploy a communication marketing plan. Communicate to residents using media, email, channel 16 and 17, Zoom, and etc. Promote Legacy YouTube channel as a possibility.
Chris, do you want to talk about each one of these separately, or because we're talking about starting different committees? Do you want to speak about, or you want to just keep going and do the whole thing?
Well, why don't I work through and then we can go back?
Okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So the format that we started with was ranking each of the goals and objectives from
Correct.
most important to least important. And the first one that you have here, to reinstate the sports and fitness committee, that was number 12 on our list. And that got 14 votes as opposed to the 21.
That's why I didn't mention it at all right then. I skipped right to project planning, communication
Okay,
committees.
so that was number 5 on the list, and it got 15 votes, and nowhere in the original document does it say that we would be appointing a planning committee. I'm curious about where these tactics came from, because they were not anywhere on the original document that we received.
Correct.
So,
What the president of the board of directors, Frank, told myself and Barb to do was come up with an idea with all the information we had. So we kicked it around back and forth. We spent, like she said, about 18, 20 hours and came up with, now, whether we do any of this or not, it's up to the board. These are all just suggestions. This is to get the talking started. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not a final project, but it's because we said we want to get something done, because we hadn't talked about our goals and objectives at all this year. So this is where we are.
so my only concern is that these are not in the same order.
No, they're not.
And I'm curious about why some of them moved up on the list and why some of them have moved down on the list. And as I recall, you and Barbara were tasked with removing the duplicates and indicating which ones were complete. There was nowhere in the directive, according to the meeting minutes, that said you were to expound on these in any way, shape, or form. Although I do appreciate the amount of effort that you put in, I think this went over and above what you were tasked to do. And I just don't understand why all of these things suddenly appear.
Once again, talking points, this is not a final process, just putting stuff out there to get people to talk back and forth, and basically the board of directors. And yeah, we kick this around, move things, cut things up, move them, change them, talk back and forth over 3 or 4 different meetings to change what we thought, that's what we're asked to do, so. But once again, and they're not necessarily in, they're A, B, C, D, they're not necessarily in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're just saying these, that's why we put letter numbers on here instead of actual numerical numbers.
So Chris, if I could interject, I
Sure.
think this is good work and it's well thought out. My concern is this, that past boards, like as you said, no longer saw the need of the Sports and Fitness Committee, no longer saw the need of the Project Planning Committee. And I know the mindset was that smaller government is better than bigger government, and committees sometimes just cause more work and spend more money and can get problematic. When I first heard a few months ago people talking about the bringing back the Sports and Fitness Committee, my first question was, I think we need to tread very lightly if boards start to undo things previous boards did without asking why they did what they did. The other thing is that the creation of a committee is to serve the board and help the board and solve a need. And I've asked for the last 2 months, both in email and face-to-face and even at these type meetings, prove to me why we need this committee. Because what I don't want to see is people working hard, devoting X amount of time and effort just to have it taken away again. We're going to have a whole new board in like 3 months. And so we need to be careful doing what we do so it just doesn't get undone by the next board. So in the last 2 months, I've had not one person tell me even one reason why we should bring back the Sports and Fitness Committee. So I'd have to, it would have to be proven to me. And the same thing with the Project Planning Committee or any other committee.
Well, if I could,
We're digressing
Reason-
again,
yeah, I know.
we're
We're just
digressing
getting into
again.
them.
We're not talking about what objectives are left, whether we still think that they should be on our list, and if so, how to prioritize them. Should we prioritize them, or should we designate a committee to do that for us?
I would like to make a recommendation that we follow the process that was used 2 years ago, and we allow the community to submit their suggestions to the board of directors via a confidential email box that we had. Remember when we did the cards on the walls, and we separated all of the recommendations from the community into tasks and into different areas of the committee. We separated it to maintenance, we separated it to rules, regulations. We did all of that.
So
The board of directors is not responsible for setting the goals and the objectives. It's the community that's responsible for submitting the goals and objectives. And if we want to do that, we need input from the community. So my recommendation is that we poll the community, whether it be by those little index cards that we used previously, or by some other method to see what they want going forward. It's not our job to set the goals and objectives. And I would also like to point out that the reason the goals and objectives have not been discussed in the past year is because we've had 4 presidents. And how, when you have change in leadership over a period of 12 months, do you get something like this accomplished? Okay, we need to put that behind us, we need to move forward, but I think we need community input on what they think is the most important thing for us to do with their money.
I agree with the last thing that you just said, that we need community input, but I don't share your view that it's not our job to establish goals and objectives for us to achieve. I think it is our job
we should not be telling the community what they need. They should be telling us what they want us to do, and then we can vote on it.
As one example, Mary Kay, let me go out on a limb here and say, I'm not sure that a Joe and Mary Q resident know whether or not we have a maintenance plan, what it looks like, whether we need to establish as a goal, as an objective, to develop a maintenance plan. So we would know that because of our close work together of the community documents and working with the community association manager.
Okay, so let me just give you an example of how I feel the community would contribute to developing a maintenance plan. Say that somebody reports that they have overgrown trees, that we have bugs at the ladies' room by the pool. They want to see grass removed from the cracks in the pavers out of the pool. All of those would fall into a bucket called maintenance plan. I'm not specifically saying that the community tells us we need a maintenance plan. They need to tell us what they want to see fixed. And then those individual pieces would go into making up a maintenance plan if they're not already on what Josh has in the CAM office. As far as mowing lawns, cutting trees, invasive, all that stuff could fall into a maintenance plan. Painting the buildings, improving the fountain, that could all fall into a maintenance plan. Those suggestions need to come from the community. We don't tell them, they tell us. Does that make sense?
Well, for clarification, are you suggesting then that all the goals and objectives that the board of directors put together over the past 4 or 5 months, that we should disregard that and start with a clean sheet of paper and now go out and ask?
I'm saying that the community needs to participate in this discussion, and we have not asked the community for their input. We can't use these headings that are on the ranking sheet as a guideline for when the suggestions come in, so that if somebody wants to talk about the message board, we stick it in the message board bucket. If somebody wants to talk about project planning, we stick it in the project planning bucket. But we need input from the community. We can't do this as 7 individuals. I pay my HOA, you pay your HOA, all these people out here pay their HOA. They have the right to have an input into how we set the goals and objectives. I also think that 21 objectives is excessive. I think that if we want to set goals and objectives, we need to tackle the top ones first and then work our way down.
I agree with that.
This
So what do we
is
think the
too
top
much.
ones are?
So, I mean.
What was that,
here's the
Josh?
top-
What do we think the top ones are? Maybe we should focus on like 3 and then try and get those done?
So the top 4 ones, based on the rankings that were done, are corrective and preventative community maintenance, review the budget, and, that's my last one, sorry. Review of budget and spending for upcoming space planning building projects, the message boards and policies and procedures.
No, I see
Those
that,
are the
but
top 4.
what are the ones that you think you could maybe focus on over the next 2 months and get set up for the next board or actually accomplish?
I thought
Space
that
planning would be one, right?
space planning would be
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
I don't think the road study is gonna happen in the next 2 months. I think the policies and procedures are something that we can work on in the next 2 months. We're gonna be reviewing rules and regulations
Okay.
today as an objective. I think reviewing the budget for the space planning, which you already said, and I think the preventative maintenance, I think that's a really important issue. There's lots of stuff that has been done around here, but there's still things that need to be fixed. And although we see things and we hear things from residents of the community, I think we need to give the residents some opportunity to comment on where they want to see that go.
Okay, so space planning pretty much it's on track, it's doing its thing, so we don't really need to discuss much about that. But if you look at, let's say, take the maintenance plan, what would be the path for getting that set up for future meetings so that we could, like have steps? So if you say we want to get community feedback, we can put together a survey or something like that, send that out.
Or we can do the index cards like we
Okay.
did a few years ago.
So let's set up a timeline for that.
That
We'll
sounds-
get the information and then set up an agenda item on a future meeting to discuss
I
that.
think that sounds logical.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what the rest of the members think about that.
Well, I think residents do email us and they email the can when they see something that needs to be done here in Legacy. I just want to just move along here a little bit. The first one, we do have an established maintenance plan. Josh already has this. The message board, that's been done. That's up and running, and there's nothing more for that. We spent over a half hour now talking about the board objectives, and we really, if we want to stay on point, we really do need to move along to some of these other things that we have to discuss today. So I don't think this is broken, so I don't, you know, I think we're fine. So,
I think we need to let the community know what our goals and objectives and how we felt about them, one way or the other, so they could email us and say, yeah, that's a great idea. What are you guys drinking? You know, that's why we're doing this. At least that's what I thought, that's why we're doing it. So,
well,
Maybe we can narrow it down to just a couple, because you've
Yeah.
only got a couple months before the board turns over, and take
Exactly.
those and focus on those.
exactly. Well, like I said, the first one's already done. The other big thing that we're gonna talk about next, that has to be done in the next few months, is we gotta nail down exactly what the people are gonna be voting on the CCNR changes. So that's an important thing that needs to be done. You know, space planning, I think, is the biggest thing. To me, that's the thing bigger than anything else. And, you know, we keep getting sidetracked by small things where we really need to focus on some of these bigger things. So, does anybody else want to talk about any more about board objectives?
Well, somehow I think that we need to rename something in there to, what,
Chris?
Chris I had suggested, rename that to projects and whatever, what was it?
Space plan?
Space plan.
Well, the website still calls it building committee.
No, but we need to rename it, I think.
So you mean add it to the existing charter that you have now? With official name and put their task list on that, or?
that would be nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it does exist. Like, saying that it doesn't exist is wrong. It does exist. We got the objectives and everything.
But
They're legit.
They are kind of, but they're not, because it never was put in the minutes. And here's the problem. So the board, and I was here when President Ormsby said there's a space planning committee. I heard that. I went back and looked, and because it wasn't in the minutes and the board passed the minutes, which are the official record of Legacy, it's nowhere. And what I'm saying, and I think they've done great work. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to beat them up. I'm trying to beat us up and say we need to do our job better, because we haven't.
So Josh, could you put that on the agenda for the next board meeting, that we clear this up legally and get it all just
Yeah.
right? Okay, that's all we need to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's the purpose of these meetings, is just to informally talk about what to do and how to do it. So please do that, Josh. So,
And add what the actual objectives are, so people out there can look and say,
That is definitely clearly defined on the website.
yeah, it's on the
That was,
website.
that was a board decision,
Yeah,
so that's done. What we can do is merge those documents with the existing charter, and then make sure there's official name.
And
Thank you.
I'm sure that there are comments in the meetings that we've converted them from an ad hoc to a standing.
yeah.
Yeah,
There was
I didn't
nothing-
expect this
I-
conversation, so I wasn't prepared.
you know, I look back to April of 2021, looking for that, because it was like, all of a sudden I realized, space planning or building committee, whichever, wasn't in the charter, which was voted on February 16th last year. And I said, well, it's gotta be in the minutes, because I was here when President Ormsby said, it's committee, and the board said yes, but it was never put in the minutes, which is the official.
So if there was a breakdown of communication and it wasn't in the minutes, it should be, because I do remember distinctly, the reason they had to change it from an ad hoc committee to a standing committee is that ad hoc committees are not allowed to be in existence for more than a year. And space planning committee or building committee clearly was well over a year. They wanted to make it right, so that was why they did that, so.
I'll go back and look at the minutes, but I thought when Alex was president, we did the objectives and called them the bidding committee, gave them their task list.
Yeah.
That's kind of official, but I'll go back and look exactly what was done at that meeting. And then we'll also merge, we'll get it set up for the 25th.
Okay, let's move on to,
Does anybody want to speak about?
oh yeah, did anybody want to speak on board objectives?
Yes, we have Rod Ross.
Good afternoon. When the new board of Legacy was residents for the very first time, I was chairperson of the planning committee. I brought a member of the planning committee along with me. That's some of the history I have with that committee. Number two, the board is not a business LLC. The board is a not-for-profit corporation. Non-profit corporations and not-for-profit corporations should let managers manage, and the board can then make the decisions based on what they're finding out from the community. I would suggest that you take a look at who is working with the committees and keeping track of the committees and who they report to. I would do it to the can. If I was sitting on the board, I would wait until I got the report and then act on that. We have a very good professional team working for us. Too much stuff. That's what I'm going to call all the stuff that's on the agenda today. What's it do? It handicaps your management team. As the principal of a school, I had one goal for the year for my first time at John F. Kennedy Middle School. The discipline committee, that was it. The teachers taught, and we had a tremendously successful year. The other point is, my God, we're worrying about 2 months. 5 new members are going to be aboard. Maybe some 5, my understanding is.
4. Been corrected, it's 4.
Well, somebody
I'm
better
staying on,
correct me.
hey, Ron, I'm staying on, so it's 4. I'm staying on, I am not going to resign.
Anyhow,
Well, I will check on that along the way, so. And I'll finish with a really interesting song. One day at a time, sweet Jesus.
Thank you, Rod. Trevor, you're up.
Thank you.
Trevor Honey, and thanks for not using my surname, otherwise everybody else would have gone up Honey. What I want to talk about, I want to make a suggestion. We've talked about committees and how committees operate, okay? I sat at a committee meeting during the summer where it was chaired from a telephone on the table, okay? That was 2 meetings. The vice chairman sat there. Now, I went to a committee training session when I become a chairman of an ad hoc committee. I went to a training session and they said, you have to run it as the board is run, exactly the same. And I wouldn't see you, Frank, chairing a meeting from a telephone while some people were away. We had a couple of Zoom meetings later on, which worked well. What I'm saying is the committee charter needs to be looked at, and you need to say whether that we bring it into the up to date with the times, and we have Zoom meetings and they're acceptable. And if you want to have telephone meetings where someone chairs from the telephone on the table, write it into your charter. I have a hearing problem. I was really upset with it, and I don't want to downgrade. If you look up the work of the committee that I was sitting on, because they're a great committee. They do a great deal of work, but I wasn't happy with being chaired from a telephone on the table. So you need to look at the charter, the committee charter, at some time or other, and put what you would accept electronically as your medium for your chair. I went back to the CAM. I got my answers, my official answers back, which said you shouldn't use a telephone. Questionable whether you should use a Zoom meeting if it's not written into the charter, but Zoom seemed okay. But they also said that there's absolutely no reason why, if your chair and vice chair are away, you shouldn't cancel the meeting and not have a meeting. That's my lot. Thank you. And I somehow think you guys should have a time limit on how long you speak as well.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Next topic.
Okay, next topic, CC&R covenant changes. I have some opinions on it, but I'll let some others weigh in first. Anybody else have to say anything?
So I think the way to really keep this productive would be to focus on the ones that you want to send forward and what changes you want to make to those. And then I'll take that feedback, get the changes to the attorney, and we'll have them do it. But I wouldn't spend much time talking about anything you're not going to do.
Okay. I think that my opinion is that we should take out the vendor vote. And we can talk about that more if you like. I think the simpler we keep it, the better. I think that now that we failed in passing the lowering of the voting and now we need 667, it's going to be much harder to get things done. And so it's more imperative that we try our very best to do it the best way we possibly can. I think it should be simpler. I think there's some pitfalls in even considering throwing the vendor thing in there, but I want to hear other opinions first, because that's what this is. This isn't I know this is kind of a first for everybody here. This is just a workshop where we're just more laid back and more just talking, and it's not like a board meeting, so.
Well, one thing about a vendors thing, if it doesn't pass, then it just stays the way it is. That's what I've said before. If it passes, we can change it to where it should be. But if it doesn't pass, it just remains the same, which the board, makes a decision. We're just trying to make it easier where the board doesn't have to do that. So I think you probably ought to leave it on there, and if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But if it does.
So Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, I share Frank's view on this, that we should drop it because in my view, it doesn't even need to be there. And why I say it doesn't need to be there is because in that paragraph, Article 5, the last two sections of that talk about waivers and exceptions. And it was my understanding, as reported by the previous Cam Sherry, that what we have been doing is having our temporary vendor trucks come in to sell these wares, and it was exercising the waiver of paragraph 5.33. And it says here, first sentence, the approving party, which is us, used to be the developer, but now it's the association, shall have the right to waive the application of one or more of these restrictions, and that refers to the title of paragraph 5 or article 5, whatever you want to call it, the uses, the restrictions. So we have been using a waiver to go out and ask people to vote, should we add this provision that permits vendors? if it should happen that we get a no vote, or get less than 667, which then means it's not approved, doesn't that give the appearance that we're doing something we shouldn't be able to do? That's what I want to avoid. I want to avoid giving the impression that we're doing something that we're illegally doing or not appropriately doing. And I think we are. So I think it should be dropped.
Well,
And why does it need to be there to begin with?
we can't make a decision on dropping any of them right now.
No, I'm just saying what I
I
think.
think save that conversation for the 25th.
Yes.
I think what you should be focused on is there's 2 of them that you know you want to put forward. What are the changes to those, if any, that need to be made? Specifically the rent one, that's the one I would be tackling right now, is how does that look? What changes do we need the attorney to make in order to put that to a vote? The ones that, like the vendor, we can't really change it is what it is. You're either gonna send it to a vote or not, and we can't make that decision at this meeting anyways.
No, but there's another one on here that, and see, I think we need to discuss that so that we are prepared for next meeting. And the other one on here is about this deductible.
That's not a.
Well, with the insurance deductible.
That was an amendment that we had advanced.
Yeah, you put that forward because there's no insurance policy that you're gonna be able to get under $2,500 deductible.
Yeah, I don't think that should be advanced. That was gonna be my point. That's
Okay.
another advancement that we did that I think we should eliminate, drop.
Sure.
Because, I don't know why we have $2,500 limit from 20 years ago. Yeah, it doesn't work. So I don't know why we would go out and ask people to approve that amendment because we can't get a $2,500 limit
Yeah.
anymore.
No, I get what you're saying. I was just
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
avoid talking about ones where we can't make a decision on right now anyways. We
Yes.
might as well talk about what needs to be changed.
Yeah.
I think the reason that was put up was just to clean things up somewhat in our documents so that it wasn't there. Yeah, because you're right.
But if it needs a 667 votes,
To take it out.
you see what I mean? So that's 2, I'm saying, that's 2 to eliminate, that what we were advancing. That's why I did.
Frank, you were at the meeting. Go ahead and you heard what people had to say about the leases, about the changes.
Yes, we did have one resident who spoke about not being happy with a 6-month lease period. I think from other people that I've spoken to, I think the majority was in agreement with a 6-month minimum. I don't see any problem with that. I'd like to see that proceed. The other part of the rental thing is all new, people, not all new owners not being able to rent. I'm comfortable with proceeding with that, but, I want to hear other board members, feelings about that and whether we proceed with that, so.
Nancy?
When I take a look at how we did the past voting and we didn't get anything across, and how we're looking at it now, I think if somebody scared the bejesus out of me about, people bringing in new people and that sort of thing and renting to them and that sort of thing, and then allow the people to vote after that, after we've given them the situation of why we brought this forward, that it would cause people to open up and say, whoa, there's something seriously going on here. I know it did me, so I'm sure it can do a lot to other people. We need to rewrite it with the focus of saying, look, here's the problem, and here's what we consider is a solution. Now, would you vote for the solution, please?
Okay.
I think the problem I have is that last part. Hooray for me and to heck with everybody else is what it's saying.
What last part is that?
The part where people coming in now that buy.
New people.
Yeah, new people will not be able to lease or rent their home.
You think that's good or bad?
I think that's bad because once again, I was here and saw what happened in 2008. A lot of people had to rent their homes because they, number one, couldn't sell wherever they were up north, and number two, they couldn't come down here and live because they still had to work. So they had to rent their homes. We had a lot of rentals at that time, individual rentals. And what the person brought up specifically was that's a selling point. Whereas somebody says, wait a minute, if I can't rent this because maybe I'm only going to be a snowbird, maybe I'm only going to be here 5 or 6 months, and I can't rent my house now because I'm new, but my next door neighbor can because they've been here before this agreement went in. I think that's an issue that we're going to have a problem getting 667 votes from.
Well, yeah, I don't.
And I understand, I don't want to see these become rental properties either, but I think we need to have at least allow the people that do buy the same situation that the people that are here already.
I think if they're not ready, they shouldn't buy now. Chris, my opinion, and I would urge you to reconsider, because I want to try to persuade everybody to see that allowing our community to continue to sell properties and to have them as rentals, I think it's bad for us. It hurts our residential community. That's what we are, residential community. Why did we even advance this? We advanced this because we already got 20 or so rentals. Officially, all right.
That we know of, yes.
No, there's more.
Yeah. Some of the tenants have been problems, but bigger than that, forget the quality or lack of quality of a tenant. Bigger than that, professionals have told us, we can look it up and read about it, that if we slowly become a so-called rental community, or don't call it that, a community that has a lot of rentals versus residential. We're a resident-owned community. I know of communities like at the intersection of 92 and 27. They're communities, homes, a lot of homes, but they're mostly rentals. This is what this could become, what's happening. We got Mark Spain, and we got, I don't even remember the names of these different investment firms. They're buying it to either flip it or as an investment. And we got people buying these homes and wanting to rent them out. Renters, tenants do not exist in a community the way residents do. It's not their home, they're temporary. We gotta discourage that in my view. And how do we discourage that? We try to stop it. Yeah, we got 20-some that we know about. And why does it come up now? Because this is growing. We're trying to exercise our responsibility to do something that protects our resident-owned community. So, I support us cutting it off. And and I also support the part about making rentals, changing it from 30 days to 6 months. Why? Because of these short-term rentals are even worse. And what happens when we have Bike Fest, for example? People want to come in here and they'll rent it for 30 days, and maybe they won't stay 30 days, but they're coming in because of Bike Fest, as an example.
I'm not disagreeing with the 6 months. What I'm just saying is, so a person who buys in, they can't rent their home if they need to. If they get into a situation, which we had back in 2008, then they're just stuck.
But back in 2008, we had a different situation. We were still building, and there were people that needed to buy a home site, and then buy a house to get built on it. And they needed a rental waiting for their house. We're all built out.
And we've kind of hashed all this out before. We've talked all about this before. The bottom line is every single resident that currently owns here will be able to rent. Nothing's changed because they're grandfathered in. We're just trying to stem the flow of these corporations buying in here and not just buying the houses and renting them out and not being compliant to things or not caring about the community. The other thing we should talk about today is the timing. I'm thinking that this is gonna be moved forward because there's no way we're gonna be able to do everything we're trying to do. I got a 3-month calendar here, and if we're going to do a marketing thing that was talked about earlier, that's gonna take some time. And
Maybe not.
maybe not. And we're gonna really have to sit down and talk about when all this stuff is gonna be done, because
I have a suggestion.
in the next few months, we're gonna have 2 town hall space planning meetings. We're gonna have a vote on the space planning building.
We have meet the candidates.
We have meet the candidates, we have voting for the new people, and then we have the voting for the CCNRs. So there's like 3 different things residents are gonna be voting on in the space of 3 months. That gets confusing, and something's gonna have to be pushed. And I don't wanna go backward here, hold on here. I did have somebody check on this in the beginning here when we were talking, and it was reported back to me that on April 24th, in the board minutes, the building ad hoc committee was changed to the standing committee and was renamed space planning. So, thank you for who did that research for me, so. Okay,
Does that mean that it negates what Chris said a little while ago, that it wasn't officially chartered?
I think it's something that we don't have to put on the next month's meeting now, but I found out that bit of information, we could look in further. So, getting back to the CCNRs.
The when?
What's that?
The when?
Yeah, the when, that's a big thing.
I
You
got a
said you had a
suggestion. My suggestion
Yeah.
is, we naturally need to currently focus on the candidates for the board and the voting. That's a vote that's going to take place. I think that the space planning, the plans that we're about to receive, that need to be vetted with everybody, and then allowing a community vote, should we advance these plans or not? I think that is the second priority, and that the covenant changes would be third priority,
I
in
would
my
agree.
opinion. So that, you know, without putting dates to it, I think the priorities are those 3, and in those, in that order.
So
Here.
my intent was just to start the conversation about making it simpler, thinking about taking some things off the voting, because this complicates things, and then the timing. So if we've done that, does anybody else have anything to say about the CCNRs?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, nobody has commented on the antennas. And that was another,
Well, the talk was whether you leave it 3 or just leave it to be determined by the board.
well, I was gonna say, I think that we do have to, it looks like we need to propose an amendment to permit the board to allow antennas for the purposes of emergency communications.
Isn't that there already?
Yeah, I don't think that that's an issue of whether we include it or not. I think what Ed's saying is that we originally restricted it to only 3, and he wants to see it to be the number of antennas as needed or as
Well,
determined
yeah,
by.
we certainly, okay, I'm not clear then. I thought that currently, without any amendment, currently, our covenant, the way it's written, does not permit the board to allow antennas. Is that correct?
It just says no antennas, so
Okay.
it has nothing to do with the board, it says no antennas.
No antennas. So, we do need an amendment if we want to get the board to be able to permit antennas for a certain purpose. So that means we do need an amendment. And I am suggesting to us that the amendment be simple, and the amendment just allows the board to approve a limited number of emergency use antennas, however the wording should be, but that we have the ability, board, to approve a limited number of antennas for the purposes of emergency communications during disasters and other times when we won't have any other communication. I think we need to do that, and I would hope that my colleagues agree here.
Yeah, I have no problem with adding that, or with keeping that on as one of the votable objectives.
Are you saying that circumventing the CCNRs there?
No, he's saying instead of having a limitation of 3 as in the language, maybe we just put something in there that says, the board has the ability to approve antennas for emergency use purposes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yes, and we could say a limited number. I mean, the only reason I think that whoever worked on this project previously came up with 3, I think is because we currently have 3 residents
And radio
who
operators.
do that. Well, we shouldn't limit ourselves, and just because we happen to have 3. It might be 1, it might be 3, it might be 5. We don't specify a number, is all I'm saying, but we do need that amendment.
Yeah, but I looked here and read this 3 times.
Microphone.
This was so pertinent, and I thought it was very clear the way it was written.
The only change that Frank wants to do, instead of 3, just put limited number, that's all.
Well,
Yeah, and we can keep everything that's right here, because you're right, it is very plain, that's all he's asking to change.
To be
Yeah.
authorized by the board. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So, let's just be perfectly clear about what we are gonna send out for a vote to the community and what we're not gonna send out.
Well, we have to
Yeah,
retract.
you can't do that.
No,
But the subjects.
but the subjects.
Gotcha.
Based on the discussion we've had here, renters is one, the antennas is the other, and then
So based on the discussion here, the only thing I've got that's really actionable is I'm gonna go back to the attorney with the language that you just suggested, have them come up with a draft of what it would be that you guys could approve. And until you come up with other ideas of what you'd want the attorney to draft for the rentals, that's just, you guys can make a decision on that next meeting.
So, but what I'm trying to determine is what we've discussed here, we had 5 or 6 original changes to the covenants, and we've eliminated how many?
You haven't eliminated any of them,
We've discussed about which ones we don't think should be in and which ones we do think.
which really,
It's not a decision, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get, I don't remember what the first.
so far, the only thing you've done is you've modified the antenna ones. And then kind of got ideas of how the other board members feel about
The rental one.
the other restrictions. So really, if you want to do anything else, you need to, come up with an idea of what you want the rental one to look like. Then I go back to the attorney, I have them make that draft, and then you guys would then vote on which ones go out to the community.
Okay, no, I get that, I'm just
Okay.
trying to make sure in my head what I need to prepare for.
Okay,
Six
well, we didn't
months-
talk
6
about the
months, right?
trail, the covenant that needs to be changed
I would say.
to help the trails. And that one I think we need to do and keep, so it would be 3 changes in total.
Well, the rental one has 2 components.
The
The
2
length of rental-
components, okay.
The length of rental and whether new residents will be able to rent. Then you got the trail thing, you got the antenna thing,
That's,
and the other things we've discussed, and we're not voting on not doing it, but
we don't
There's-
think that in
there's
this
strong
discussion,
concerns about proceeding with those other ones.
I think we have a consensus that we don't need the others. That's a good thing to have. That'll help us fix that.
Did anybody
So
set up?
before we move on, basically, I will go to the attorney and I will get them to draft up the changes. We're not doing any changes, you guys don't have any other ideas for the rental one? Okay, so next meeting on the 25th, we'll have this on the agenda again, and you can decide which ones you want to send to vote. All right, so speaking would be Jenny Olson.
Jenny Olson. I attended both of the town hall meetings that you had regarding the CCNRs. There were a few people there, not as many as I thought would be, but I made sure I attended both. And at both it came up by me and others that we were opposed to the 6-month rental. I am a Florida resident, which means I need to be here 6 months and a day. So it would be impossible for me to rent my home, say I had a surgery and couldn't come down for a year. I would be unable to rent my home, and I might want to. In fact, I've suggested that a friend of ours might like to rent, and someone said, maybe don't tell anyone, just let them use it. And I said, well, that's really not legal, so that's not what I'm hoping for. When I also read what you proposed, a rental of at least 6 months, and no more than 3 times a year, I thought, what's the matter with this mathematics? How could we do 3 times a year and not less than 6 months? So I just chuckled when I read that. So anyway, I really would like you to consider something that would be shorter than 6 months. It can be 4 months, it can be 5 months, but it should not be at least 6 months in my estimation. I will vote no if you do, but that's, I'm only one person, and maybe that doesn't matter, but I just wanted to let you know. And I agree with Chris, that when a new person moves in, they would like to have some of the same privileges that other people do. So I think it would be wise, whatever the rule is, it's the rule for everyone. That's what I'm thinking. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jenny. I will point out that that wasn't a mathematical error. That was actually to close a loophole, because a landlord can have a 6-month lease and say, we'll say it's 6 months, but then you're really only going to stay for 2 months, and you break the lease, and then I could do it again, and then I could do it again, and then I could do it again. So it closes the loophole. So it wasn't a mathematical error. It's actually a very wise component of that. So okay, anything else on the CCNS?
Well, I was wondering, in the case of some of our people that, okay, they might have to leave and they can't rent their house, but at present people can. And the point is, we could say, okay, the limit is 6 months, but what happens if there's an emergency in some place? What I'm trying to get at is, can we say difficult situations go to the board and we can overcome or change the rule for that individual?
I don't think it's needed. I think it's covered adequately. Are you saying an emergency situation? Are you saying that if somebody signs a lease for 6 months and then has to leave earlier?
No, I'm talking about the owner.
Okay.
Say the owner needs to go up north for longer than
Just
that.
for an example, say I travel up north and I have an automobile accident and I'm confined to a rehab facility for 9 months and I can't get back here. And I wanted to rent my home for that 9-month period or for only 3 months. Would there be an exception process for me to file with the board because, not as a board member, as a resident, but because I had an extenuating circumstance?
I don't think so, because where do you draw the line?
I'm not saying I agree with it.
I think
I'm
that
just
would
saying
be a legal quagmire, so.
I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm just saying I think that's what Nancy was trying
Yes,
to.
that's what I tried to get.
is
Right.
That if someone went back to their home state and had an emergency situation where they could not come back, would they be able to rent?
Yeah. Well, it's just my opinion, but I don't see any room for vacillating that. If your home is not, if your home is not, if you're not living in that house, yes, you could rent it for, but it has to be a minimum of 6 months.
No, I'm not, I agree with you, I think what Nancy's trying to say is, if there's an exceptional circumstance that's beyond our control.
So the only way that would really come into play is if you built something into the language that said subject to, exceptions or something subject to board approval.
And that just leaves us wide open.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask your attorney about that.
I agree, I'm not saying that we do it, I'm just trying to explain
No,
what I
I
think
know.
Nancy's trying to get forward.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing on unfinished business. and we might not have to spend too much time on this. I've looked through all of it, have it right here. Any talk or discussion on rules and regulations and proposed changes?
They're not ready, they're not ready to be adopted, I know that.
Right.
Because there's, this has been on a shelf for some months. And I, for one, I'm not sure if there were others, I, for one, went through them, and found multiple proposed changes that are ill-advised, and some may be illegal. And as a result, I wrote a memorandum pointing out what I thought was either incorrect or ill-advised about a change, and proposed what I think the language should be. And it was just left unfinished. So, they really need a look. I'm not sure whether it's we gotta do it or whether a committee's gotta do it. I know the committee worked and proposed the changes, but we never did get resolved the questionable areas.
Right. And the reason was because the CC&Rs had to be worked on first, so that's why, and this is our first crack at this.
Okay, all right.
Do you want suggestions from us now? Is that,
Sure.
okay?
Well, yeah, no, Chris, sorry, I don't wanna be rude and stop you, but instead of going through line items of all the changes that need to be made, maybe we take a, bigger look at this and say, what would be a plan so where we could get these to the point where they would be adoptable? Cause I
I
don't think you
agree.
guys wanna go through
No.
line item by line item and go
I
through those
agree.
changes.
I think that Josh is right on target there. Because there's multiple areas.
So we already had a committee give us this,
Well,
so
what
what do
happened
we
is,
do next?
yeah,
Are you
Chris,
sending it back to the committee, or you
No.
wanna have
No,
email? Like,
I
what are you sending?
even got it in front of me last July. I wrote a memo asking questions.
I know.
And the reason is because when I started to ask questions of the presenter, I was asked, you know what, why don't you send your questions?
Right.
So I said, okay, and I did that. And what happened was, our previous CAM shut it down. And the questions never got answered. So that's why I did what I did and pointed out the problems with it. But again, it never got done.
I know. I remember,
Could you,
got a company.
could you do me a favor and resend that to me?
I can, I saved all those, cause there was multiple board members that made comments,
Right.
so I'll send them.
Yeah, resend it to everybody
I
again.
just don't recall all the issues that you brought to our attention, and I don't want to miss
Yeah,
anything.
please, let's not go through all those.
Yeah.
Let's figure out a
But you know
process
how
and how we
you
can,
are.
yeah.
And,
Figure out a process that we can.
and I'll send you my,
Yeah, no, please, that's
Yeah.
exactly what we need to do.
okay?
Did anyone sign up for the rules and regs?
Jenny, you had a check mark that was closed, so no one did.
So,
I just want to say there was one person who was going to, but I told her I've already notified that, we should keep this one in there, and I'll send that to Josh. About parking over a sidewalk.
okay, yeah. So, right now, we're finished the unfinished business, and before we start the new business, I think we were remiss in not doing this in the beginning. The lovely young lady we have over here is our newest member of our CAM. This is Rita, and she took the place of Josh, she took the place of Sherry, and just wanted to welcome you, Rita. This is our first workshop in a long time, so don't think they're all like this, because, So, all right, welcome. Thank you, Rita.
So before we end the rules, do we have any type of, next step? Because I feel like we're going down this list and we're not creating next steps. So what would be the next, you guys are gonna review everything, all the feedback?
I
and
need you
then
to send me the original email, because I
Okay.
don't remember everything that was in there off the top of my head.
No, I get that.
And then
So
I
then-
think all of us should send back our comments to you,
Okay,
and then have Josh compile comments,
okay,
and then we can either discuss them as a board, because this doesn't need to go to a community vote, this can be approved by the board
board directors, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
So
so-
once we've reviewed all those, what do you think would the next step after that would be?
Then I think we republish them with the changes and that we again review them.
So
and-
I will compile them and change them,
Yes.
subject to your review.
Yes.
All right.
You plan, Josh, or shall I send to everybody?
Everybody send any feedback that they have to me. I
Josh
will
is gonna
compile
send
all
your
that,
email to us.
make the changes,
You're
and then
gonna-
on the 25th, you'll
provide
make a,
it.
you'll make a
Let
review.
me
of them.
suggest, guys, if you look at what I wrote, you focus on what I've pointed out, and then form an opinion whether you think that's correct or not correct. You agree or don't agree. Because where I did not suggest a problem and a fix, that meant that I was okay with what the committee come up with.
I understood that the first time.
Okay,
Got it, sorry.
okay, very good. Yeah, you send that, we'll look forward to
All
that.
right.
Okay, under new business, the first thing is, we had 3 separate requests from the softball club. And I think everybody got that information?
Yes.
And so the first item to speak about is they have requested to be able to have banners put up on the outfield fence during a game. And they would be put up just before the game and taken down after the game, so they would not be permanent. This has come up before in past boards and everything. And I personally have no problem with that at all. I think it's probably a good idea.
So I'll give some, these banners will be maintained by the softball club. They'll be put up by the softball club, taken down by the softball club. Any revenue that comes from the advertising of those would be the softball club. So the question today would be, do you see any like conflict with existing rules or anything that's history that you guys have experienced that would, you know, do we need to create a policy around this? That type of thing. That's really.
I suggest a modification to the request, or I'm not sure if it was their request or something from our end. But the part about putting banners up before the game and taking them down after the game, I don't think that that's necessary. I think that's burdensome. And I can tell you from personal experience, having been a member of the softball club a dozen years ago, the same as every other community in the league, we hung the sponsors' banners on our outfield fence, and they stayed there for the season. There was no taking it down after each game. Personally see no reason for that. Why should we burden the club with
Well,
doing
that was their offer, essentially. That was-
Okay.
They came up with that,
Well,
not
okay,
us.
what I'm suggesting, and I hope you guys would agree, that's what I'm doing. I don't think we need to have them do that. I think that it's fine. Every other community does it. The most direct comparison is Royal Highlands, the first community that Pringle did, and they've been doing it. Highland Lakes does it. Every community, they have their banners up.
So does the Plantations.
They all have them up, and for the season. And if I was a sponsor, I might even have a problem with this going up and down. I want my sponsorship to be visible to the community people when they pass the field, not just when they go to the game.
We should point out that the HOA would not incur any cost of doing this. They would, the softball team, you know, just to make that clear, so it's not costing us anything. I have no problem with keeping up all season, as long as they don't become ripped and shot worn and, you know, aesthetically unpleasing.
So do you want me to create a policy template for this, or do you guys just leave it up to the club?
We just have to make sure it doesn't, that it's compliant to the rules that we have, because I know there are some rules here in regards to signage. So if something has to be amended to allow them to do that, we just have to have it all consistent and legal.
Okay.
I'd just like to say that I was head of the sports and fitness when that then Cameron, who knows, I think it was Dennis the Menace, But it was just closed down and there was no reason. So they could not make any money from the outside. I'm so happy to hear this coming back to fruition.
Okay. The next thing was that, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically they want to explore the possibility of buying a piece of equipment that, for lack of better terms, is kind of like a fancy rototiller for the sand. It's a Toro unit.
Yeah, it's basically a Toro Sand Pro, and it's the way the softball field works now. We have Yellowstone do dragging of the field. They do a deep dragging, and then they do like a conditional dragging before the game. The Sand Pro Toro is a specific piece of equipment that will do a better job. Softball field has said they have the money to be able to purchase this, and they would like to purchase it and be able to store it in the garage down by the ball field. And that's basically the history.
So is this to be used between games to smooth out the infield or before games?
That would probably be before, in between. Because it would be theirs, they could, use it the way they need to use it.
And the homeowners association would have no responsibility in the event that the garage down there is
That's what I would
vandalized?
recommend, yeah.
I don't have any problem with them buying it. I think they were looking at a used unit that was less expensive than brand new. As long as the HOA does not incur any cost of the upkeep of it or the responsibility or the liability stemming from using it, I have no problem with that, allowing them to do that. I think that's fine.
But doesn't that mean that a memoranda needs to be
Yeah,
prepared?
basically, same thing with the signage. I'll create a simple policy that you guys can ratify in the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with at this juncture for, the HOA to partake in any of the cost. I know we've spent copious amounts of money on the softball field so far this year, but I'm happy to let them do that. I think that's great. So that's my opinion. We're not voting on anything today.
No, but yeah, I was a little discomforted, we don't even have a written request with the specifications of what they're requesting and what they would take responsibility for. That's why I say we would need to do some memorandum.
Yeah, we can do that.
The third thing they mentioned was a little perplexing to me, only because of just how it was done so far. They mentioned that there's a women's softball team in Arlington Ridge that would like to rent the usage of our softball field for their games because there's 2 legacy women that I guess play on that, 3, okay? Legacy women that play on that. My first thought was, as well-intentioned as the softball club was or is, that kind of thing should come from their CAM to our CAM and from our CAM to the board to discuss. And the club itself shouldn't probably have been a player in it.
I think the intention was to float a trial balloon and figure out what type of issues might come up and maybe start thinking about ways that it could happen, if it could happen at all. That was the whole point.
At the same time, and you asked the question, if we had a sports and fitness committee, that's what the club would go to the committee, and the committee would bring it up to the board and said, hey, we think this is a good idea, or it's not. So that's what the committees are good for.
Well, that's great. I've been waiting 2 months to hear something like that.
So, Josh, my only concern is liability. Do we have to increase insurance for?
I don't think you would, depending on how the policy was set up now. I could run it by the insurance agent just to make sure.
So,
The biggest impact is your Yellowstone contract will change.
yes.
But I would expect that any revenue from the rental would clearly offset that. and I would guess it would probably offset any change to your insurance policy as well.
So, I also have a question, and this came from another resident. Since Arlington Ridge wants to use one of our amenities, would we be permitted to use one of their amenities, for example, the theater?
I'm sure that if there was a formal proposal for this to happen, we could have that conversation with them.
I'm not,
I put a question mark on this rental. I mean, I don't know why there would be, personally, I don't see us renting it, leveling a fee. I think that, and part of what Mary Kay just said, I think plays into this. Sometimes communities do things reciprocal with one another. You know, for example, that go back to softball for a minute. There's that Sun and Fun softball league that holds its tournaments at different member communities, and there's no fee charged. It's just, okay, they used our field once or twice. I don't see why we would have to charge.
I think they're currently renting from another community, and they would like to use our field because it's in better condition, is
It's
what I
closer,
hear.
yeah.
And it's closer,
But
so.
think about it, if we rent it to them, well then, if Mary Kay, her example, for example, we use the theater, well, we'll rent it to you. I mean, why do we have to charge each other?
well, I think as long as there's something reciprocal, because, you know, we're not 100% benevolent, we will incur more cost from Yellowstone, and we do have to look at any liability issues and insurance issues, so it has to be looked at further. We're not saying yes or no right now. This is just the first crack at it, and we're just talking about it at this point.
Yes.
This is something kind of new, having another community coming and wanting to use one of our amenities, so I think we just have to look at it, you know, further, so.
I would also like to add that Pear Park does have softball fields available for rental from other communities as well. And if that is not, we may need to look into that as an option if we decide that this is not something that's gonna be good for Legacy to allow another,
Well, we don't have to look into it because we have a field, but
Correct.
they would have to look into it.
but they would have to look
Yeah.
into, yes, so we might provide them with that option as well. It may be less expensive for them to rent at Pear Park than it is to use our amenity in exchange for something else or for a cost.
I'm surprised to hear that Pear Park, which is a county facility, I'm surprised that they would charge county residents to use it.
There is a fee to use their
Wow.
fields.
How
Well,
about
they have to maintain them as well.
Yeah, okay.
They have to cut the grass and put the turf down and replace the clay and maintain the fields and the bathrooms.
Well, it's like
and-
the public library, I'm thinking, we don't pay a fee.
So the other thing though is that I think there is a rule someplace, Josh, you may know better than I, about a percentage of residents on a team to, you know, use facilities.
Yeah, but we could look at all that and create a policy. or-
Right, I just don't wanna not mention that, cause that has to be looked at too.
Sure.
Yeah, that's definitely one.
Actually, the policy is for people coming in and using, we allow 25%, a maximum of 25%, to use these facilities. Nothing has ever been said about the softball field.
Okay.
I knew there was a percentage.
Yeah.
So.
I'd just like to point out that if this was, had been submitted to the Sports and Fitness Committee, they would have had a better report to you, much better.
Thanks, Nancy, I appreciate that.
And I will also submit that since the Sports and Fitness Committee was disbanded, I don't think anybody's had any problem getting any of the equipment that they've needed, and there hasn't been nothing's been broken.
No, but the problem is too, that everything has to be funneled through one person. All these people on the Sports and Fitness Committee that we used to come up with everything and all the problems and stuff, and had to go once to the camp, now all of a sudden he's got a whole.
Since,
half dozen.
and if I could just add, Frank, since you didn't know, well, how did we get 4 pickleball courts? How did we get 4 bocce courts? How did we get 4 shuffleboard courts? How did we take care of the gym? How do we take care of the horseshoe courts? How do we take care of the pool? All these things were done through the sports and fitness, so just like she said, it was funneled through and then came to the board as a recommendation suggested, and this is why. Otherwise, none of these things would have been done.
And I would like to add that the Sports and Fitness Committee only meets once a month, and so sometimes decisions are delayed, and as it stands now, if someone from Shuffleboard or Bocce needs something, they go right to the can and they get it within a matter of a few days. So there's a little bit of a time lag in having a committee funnel all of these requests, and that may not be in the best interest of the amenity or of our community.
Yeah, as long as I've been involved, I haven't had even one complaint about something not getting done, sports and fitness wise, or nobody getting pickleballs, or this hasn't happened, or that hasn't happened. So in some ways, I think this is a solution, looking for a problem that doesn't exist. But we all have our different opinions, and that's what we're here for, so.
So talking with Shuffleboard this past week, they wondered how come their shuffleboard courts never were finished. They said, you know, everybody else has a border around their shuffleboard courts, or around their courts, like bocce, like pickleball. They said, well, they put some rocks down here, but they never finished on the other end. We're just kind of like the right-handed stepchildren, and they wondered about that. Yeah, it's because I was out looking at the courts while people were there. Once again, if you got a committee, then it gets funneled through. And how we grew through the years with these committees is what I was trying to bring up. That's why they were good and positive and a reason to have them.
Not saying I'm for committees or another, but how come I never heard about that? Why didn't anybody ask me? Maybe we could have got a proposal that could have gone to the board.
Right.
I mean,
Because there weren't a committee.
Well, people have mouths that could go and register a complaint or a concern to the can. For instance, I got an email not too long ago saying that the shuffleboard courts had huge cracks in them, and this is going to cost a big thing, and this is going to be very expensive and things like that. And most of this board took it upon themselves to walk over there and look at the shuffleboard courts and to inspect the concrete, and I was one of them. And at this point in time, it's perfectly fine. There were hairline cracks that did not mess up the play, and they did not need any attention addressed to it. And I think normal maintenance resurfacing when the time comes will be fine. So we have been looking at that, but this is just where Chris and I, we respectively disagree on some things. I don't believe everything needs a committee. I think smaller is better, and committees should be formed to help the board and to solve problems, and not to absolve the board from responsibility. And I think lesser is better, and committees can tend to just be problematic. I sat in a meeting a couple of years ago that Sherry did. It was a mandatory meeting for all committee members to learn about how committees work. And I walked in there as a chairperson for the Space Planning Committee, and I never saw a more bitter, hostile, aggressive, angry crowd than I saw in that room. And I was like shocked. And in fact, of all the committees, I think the committees that were treated the worst in the past was the Space Planning Committee, and we were the only ones with smiles on our faces. And I didn't see where any of that did any good. If something's not broken, don't fix it. And what I really don't want to see is, let's say we start all these committees. What happens when the next board starts, and we're going to have 4 new openings, okay? What happens if they see something different and they disband a committee again? And all of a sudden it's like every year a committee gets disbanded, then started, then disbanded again. That doesn't help the morale of this community at all. So if you can prove to me that the quality of legacy is enhanced by having a committee, I would certainly consider it. But if that's not an obvious truth, I would back away from it. And I would always ask the question, why did previous boards get rid of something? So, all right.
people want to talk about.
Okay. Two people want to talk about softball, let's do it.
So, Terry Gedman first.
I think most of you have kind of covered some of my concerns. I think it's great that we help other people in our community and elsewhere. Liability was one of my biggest concerns, which I know Josh is gonna now check on the insurance, because while it's a great idea, we don't wanna make our community liable down the road, and then we have a lot of other issues or problems. I guess one of the questions would be, who's gonna set, that you need to look at if you approve it, who's gonna set the amount that we charge for the rental? And because of the added cost of insurance, maintaining the field and what have you, is that rental money gonna come back to the HOA? And then we use that to offset the cost? Or did they even bring up, did they want that money to go back to the softball club? So those are just a couple of things. Everything else, I think you all have addressed. And I guess one other question being, and they're bringing it up based on the women's group over at Arlington. If it's approved, does that also mean that if other communities or other teams wanted to, they would also be able to rent the field as well? So just food for thought when we open that up.
And Bill Stoltenberg would like to comment as well.
I think I can answer all your questions pretty much. Bill Stoltenberg. First of all, the signage we've been approached by J&B Golf Cars, the car wash, a lot of our sponsors that sponsor our ball teams about signage. And that money we would use to offset money that you may be spending already on the field. We're willing to, use that to try to lessen the cost for the HOA for anything in the future, like the border, the new top on the fence. We would be willing to pay for that in the future, not have to have you guys give us $1,700 or $1,800, and we put it on ourselves like we did this time. The piece of equipment is basically going to be used between games or when what Yellowstone does isn't quite good enough, and we can kind of enhance what they already do. And we would buy that used with our own money. We have the money, we've been raising money. As far as insurance on the piece of equipment, I don't know I'd like you to find out if we have to purchase a piece of, something in case it catches on fire and burns the building down while it's stored or something. We need to know that part. That's why I went to you guys with this. And then as far as renting the field, I only brought this up because we have 3 Legacy ladies that play on the Arlington ladies team, and there aren't currently enough Legacy ladies interested in playing softball so we could have a team, and they are our sister community in our men's softball, although one lady does play on one of the men's teams. So the deal is I said I would bring it to you guys. We don't want the money. We would actually probably be involved with helping get the field ready for the ladies. It's going to be more on us. We're not asking for really anything. I mean, any money we get, we would turn over to you, and if that could help offset any additional cost for Yellowstone, I hope it would. And if you have to set the fee so that it does, great. I didn't give them a number. I just know what they are paying Spanish Village right now.
What are they paying for?
I think it's about $300 for the year. That's not very much money, but yeah. And we're not interested in renting the field out, believe me, as a club. All we were doing was trying to make it nicer. And the reason they don't use Pear Park, and it's quite a bit at Pear Park, it's $25 an hour or something like that to rent a field, is because the bathroom situation. It's so far away from the bathrooms, and also there's no concessions. That's another thing that we could do, is have the concession stand. These ladies actually draw bigger crowds than the guys. And so there would be an opportunity for the softball club to make some money selling concessions if they wanted to. So that was all what this was all about. I just wanted to give it to you guys. Because we don't want to do anything without your approval, so that's why, so.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
That's it. Next.
Next.
I didn't sign up to speak.
You gotta sign up, Howard, I'm sorry.
It's very pertinent to what they're talking about.
Well, I would say because we're not making a decision or
Right,
anything
we're not
on this
making any
time,
decision.
whatever, maybe we can get together and talk about it, and I'll make sure they get that information.
Yeah, so, okay, last thing, and this could be, interesting. Pond access for clubs and recreation. Request by the resident club to provide safer access to the pond, so.
Which club?
Sailboats,
The sailboat club,
Ah, thank you.
yeah, the sailboat club, so.
but it's also kind of been a topic in the community recently.
Yes.
So,
Josh, why don't you, give the background?
I don't think I've been here long enough to give you background,
Well,
but basically.
The request that came in.
Yeah,
If
it-
not, I'll do it.
Yeah, we were approached by, I've been approached by a resident that talked about it, and then Nancy and Barb had gone to one of the events, or Nancy went to the event, and they talked about how accessing the pond to launch the boats was really challenging, and it's a steep part of the pond where they actually take the boats down. Right now, there's steps there, there's benches there. I've been told those were never really authorized, and they were just put in. But I don't know, you know, I've only been here 6 months, so I don't know.
Actually, they were authorized by the past camp.
The steps were.
Oh, she was the one that told me that they weren't authorized by her. Somebody just installed them and everybody just turned a blind eye.
Right. Okay.
That was 11 years ago.
So it wasn't shared.
No, it was like 11 years ago.
Well, we're not taking stock, guys, we can't do that, so. Basically, they are there, they get used, and there's been several requests for, you know, pond access, and then in this case with the sailboat club, they want to be able to add some enhancements to that area to make it safer to launch their boats.
What is the enhancement?
They want to add some steps. In other words, there's 3 steps right now. They're all-weather steps, and they're down close to the water line, and they work, but they actually need, they probably like 4 or 5 more. They put the steps in themselves. They're very solid. You can go out, you can check them out. I know there's probably some question as to whether we're responsible for it legally or not. But like I said, if you go out and check, the steps are in there very, very solidly. They did a great job, but they just need more of them. Yeah, they would like to put in a whole big different setup. I've been involved with it too, but yeah, that's only $17,000 to $20,000. And they don't have that much money right now. That would be like for a walkway and a landing down at the bottom. Just to add some more steps would help immensely, because it is, and when it gets, like they did a holiday boat parade, and they had 4 members also from Highland Lakes come over. They had 10 boats out there that looked fantastic. They had a whole bunch of people out there watching. It's been put on our, I think, on our website.
On YouTube.
It was just a lot of fun. People were out there for about an hour and a half. It was nice, but they need some more steps. And they were looking to ask us legally if they can do that. They want to do that.
I would support that, unless there's a
Yeah.
reason not to.
So the email that came, that I got, said that they were looking to put in a portable dock.
I think we need to like take a big step back. So we continue to tell residents that they should stay away from the ponds, and there's been like this culture of liability for being anywhere near the ponds. So do we need to create policy around how residents can use the ponds for access or for recreation? I think we should kind of look at this like, we've not really wanting people to do it in the past. Now we have people that are using it and they're wanting to have better access. So maybe we should think about what our stance is as far as people using it.
Josh, I gotta tell you, there's only been the sailboat pond that we've been talking about. It's the only pond, to the best of my knowledge, that anybody ever wanted to access. But maybe I don't know something.
There are some fishermen.
Yeah, deaf. There are some people that.
Fish.
And honestly, they'll ask me, somebody will say, hey, can I go fish in this pond? And I have to look at them and say, well, I don't really care, but there's no real clear policy on it.
There is. It's called a Florida statute. We looked at this years ago with Dennis Mash. And Florida statute says you can fish in any retention pond that you want to, but you cannot move the fish from one pond to another pond.
Yeah, but that
a
doesn't
Florida
cover
statute.
your community.
Okay.
That's
Well,
a
that's a Florida statute.
Sure, but it's also common ground, and you can't, even though the statute says a certain thing, you should create a policy in your community and make it clear to everybody what that is. That's all I'm saying, and that's the main reason I think you guys should be
So
discussing
maybe
this.
like under rules and regulations.
Something, yeah.
If possible, but, we ought to be conscious of the fact that we put 4 benches. 4 benches, I think is the number, at the so-called sailboat pond.
Yep.
To facilitate the sailboating taking place in that pond.
Sure.
So other than that activity at that pond, which we have facilitated in the past, we're putting 4 benches. The only other thing I'm now finding out is that we have some residents who like to fish in the pond. Okay,
Not that.
not that one, okay.
So that would be in the policy, that you can't fish in that pond. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
You gotta have it clear.
Okay, that's fair.
So I was told that a dock has already been built and that they have a portable dock that they put in and take out. They put in before they use it and then take it out when they're done. And, we just need to get some clarity because I think some things have happened that we don't know about. And I know people are probably signed up to speak, so we'll hear all about that after we talk about this. But there are some liability issues. I know I remember speaking to Sherry about this before she left. And what I was told by a number of people here that have been here for a while is kind of different than what I'm hearing now. So I'm not really sure what the real truth is on this. We were told that none of that over there at all was done with board approval, but that past boards kind of looked the other way, and they were content in continuing to look the other way until more things were asked for and it became more legitimized. And so the concerns I have is that, is there a liability issue? Is there insurance issues? I know we have other sailboat people from other communities coming here. And, is that an issue if somebody slips and falls? Because we were told that nothing was a problem until the other day when somebody slipped and fell. So we just need to know the truth. I'm not against what they're doing. I think the sailboats are great. I used to have a radio controlled one. So I think they're fine. It's just, as a board member, I have to be concerned with the fiduciary responsibility of the board, of the legacy, and can we get into a snag getting sued or liability-wise or whatever. So I'm kind of neutral on this, but we need to get all the facts straight because we're hearing innuendos and things like that. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, sure. But the additional steps, it sounds like it's going to make it safer and then therefore minimizing any liability.
I will say that the board didn't ignore it because somehow, some way, money was spent to put down 4 concrete pads and move those 4 meshes which came from the bocce court area over to there. So the board was actually involved a few years ago.
I think I want to hear, did anybody sign up to speak on this?
Yeah, we've got, 2 people.
So I think I want to hear from these 2 individuals, because all we're doing right now is batting things back and forth. I want to hear what they have to say before we go any further. That's my personal opinion. Does anybody else
Jerry
have an
first.
objection?
You go first.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Wilkert. I'm a full-time resident from the 4 years now from the frozen tundra of upstate New York. My wife says, I can't bring my support dog Lotus to a board meeting or a workshop. So I have with me past Commodore Gary Dominice and our current treasurer, to which we have $59 with us today. And they can each speak on some topic here. Against my protest in the last few months, I was made Commodore of the club. Gary started this club some 11 years ago and has been Commodore since then. So this sailing has gone on for quite a while. And he can speak towards the formation of that club and the bench fiasco. There are two problems you have with sailing in that lake. And one, yes, is that the bank is somewhat steep and some people have problems getting down there. So we volunteered to carry their boat down. And what we typically make is this sailboat carrier that we launched into the pond. So the other problem is once you get down there, to put the boat in, you have to use this launcher and lean over to get to deep water, which we have been, or I have been, digging out a little spot to do that, which is hard to do sometimes. So we did have this platform that Carl did make that we could unfold and put in the truck and bring it back and forth, or we tried to store it there under the tree with a camouflage blanket on it. But we're told to get it out of there. So the two things that are getting access to that pond somehow and launching your boat. And for the past number of months, one individual used to come and watch our meeting, watch our sailboats, and would always criticize us for not doing something to make the situation better. And none of us ever did anything. That individual came back time after time, and I got tired of it, so I went home and drafted up the Rolls Royce of a launching facility. Put it out for a bid and came back at $17,000, and we're not going to make that crushing cans. So we need to come up with some kind of alternative. But to answer your questions, those are the two things we need to accomplish: getting down to the shore and launching the boat, and not having it cost a fortune. And Gary, unless you have any further questions, can come up and speak to some of the past history, because there have been, from what I understand, some confusion on that. Okay?
Good up, Gary.
My name's Gary Dominice, and I've been here 11 years. The first day I got here, almost the first day I got here, I had a bigger boat than I currently have now. It had a 9-foot mast on it. I took it down to the pond and started sailing, and I haven't stopped except I got bigger boats. But I walked over to see Treva Treva, remember? I can't remember. Treva, I talked to her and I said, Treva, I want to start a yacht club and I want to sail in this pond, because of the height of the wall or the height of the ground above the water, we can see the sailboats and what they're doing and how far apart they are. If we're on the water, we can't see that. It looks like they're combined, but when you get above it, you can see they're apart. She said, done, you can do it. You can have that, you can have access to the pond, and you can have your club over there. So then she said, let's just call the Water Bureau. What's the Leesburg, not Leesburg, but Lake County Water Authority or whatever. She called them and said, can you come down and tell me whether we can do this or not? He came down with a truck with a boat on the back, and he said, yeah, we can do that. That's great. He backed the boat in the water. He and I both got in it. We put out 15 ducks within a half an hour. The ducks have been there for 11 years. We just changed out new ones. We just bought another $250 worth of new ones and put new ones in, and some babies with some mothers. So that's what that's all about. And the 4 seats that are over there were by the pickleball court, Treva came to me one day and says, do you want those over there? Because I think they'd be really pretty for your guests to come to use and to watch what you're doing. And I said, sure. Next thing I know, I show up and they got cement pads down and they got the benches down, and I made a policy right on the spot to club members, those are not for you. You bring your own chair, you sit in your own butt in your own chair, and you do your own thing with the water in the boat. That is for guests. Those chairs are for, those, whatever they are, for guests to come. And that's what we use them for. And they were never just thrown out. They were gonna be thrown out, and True said, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna put them underneath that tree over there so people can watch what we're doing. And we get people all the time coming in, parking their RVs, or not RVs, but their little golf carts, their cars, or parking along somewhere else and coming over and having a blast watching us be fools of ourselves. I started the club 11 years ago, but in 2014 I created the American Model Yachting Association Club. So now we are a club since 2014. I pay dues every year out of my own pocket because it's not that much. But now we have access to everything we need, and we can have races here. We can do all kinds of wonderful things. And in fact, we've had a race 2 or 3 years ago. We had a race. A couple of the clubs came down. We had tents up. We had music. We had some singing going on, and we had about 24, 25 boats out there racing against each other. And we had people galore coming down and watching. So it's a hobby for us, and it's a safe hobby if we do things correctly. And that's why we want the steps to go in. We don't need all kinds of fancy stuff. It'd be nice to have the dock in there, because then we can step on a dock instead of getting our boots wet, and just put the boat in the water, step out, walk up the hill. And we have the dock to put in, if we can put it in. We had it in, but a Cam here said, get that effing thing out of there right now. And that was her exact terminology, without all the words. So that's the history of the club, and where we've been and where we plan on going. So, any questions?
That's it.
I have some questions, but I'm not sure you can answer them.
Sure.
Are there alligators in that pond?
Yes, there are alligators in the pond, and when I first got here, we had several alligators, and I told the other sailors, do not sail in or around the alligators. Don't go in and bang into them. Don't play games with them. Sail around them and stay away from them. We've never had an issue.
My other concern is the dock that you're currently using, that you put in and take out. Is that sturdy enough to support the weight of you and your?
Oh yeah, we can put 4 to 6 people. We can put 4 to 6 people on that dock. And yeah, it's sitting.
Gary, she asked the question. Talk to her. Mary Kay did.
Oh, you can put 4 to 6 people on there without a problem with their boats. The boats only weigh 16 pounds, so they're not a big heavy weight thing. But you can put people. But you probably only want 1 or 2 out there at a time because you're moving boats around. You don't want to. We don't try and rush like be the first one in the water. Who cares?
So my only concern is that it not become a permanent structure, because that would encourage other people who are not as
Should be.
smart as you.
It should be a permanent thing to encourage other people to come down and use it with their kids. For instance, want to have a little model boat in there and play. Come down and go fishing if they
I'm not
want.
concerned about the boating aspect. I'm concerned about them just standing there and possibly jumping in the pond because they think it's.
But no jumping. You can sign things.
I don't think.
Because they can jump right now if they want.
Yeah.
You
what
can go
I'm saying
swimming
to
in
you
the
is
pond
I
if
think
you
that a temporary dock may be a solution, but I'm not in favor of a permanent dock, because that would also encourage people in other ponds to put docks in where they don't belong, especially in the natural ponds, because St. John's say you're not permitted to fish in those natural ponds. And I'm afraid that it would set a precedent. So I don't object to a temporary fix, that you could put the dock in and then take it out when you're done. I don't
And
know
if we take it in and out, if we can leave the dock there, there's a place for it to go.
So you want to store the dock somewhere?
Sure. Well,
Store the dock is
yeah.
what you're trying to do.
Instead of carrying it home every day.
Not leave it on the pond.
For the last 3 years, I've had the dock next to my kitchen outside.
Okay,
It looks ugly.
I misunderstood that. I thought you wanted to leave it physically in the water permanently.
Mhm. Well, I would love to.
But I'm concerned about a safety issue there and about it setting a precedent for other people who
Okay.
have already expressed concerns about wanting to fish off certain ponds. So I really don't have an objection to you taking it in and out. I think,
I don't think you can, yeah, I mean, you're,
it's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not stating this
Yeah.
for the board, I'm just stating this as my personal
It's the
opinion.
best pond in here for us to sail because we're up so high, we can see the distance between the boats. If you're on the water and looking out and you see two boats like this, you say, how close are you? I don't know, let me go up the hill here and take a look. Now you find that they're that far
Okay, so
apart.
I think what I would like to do is to have Josh form some kind of a policy, like we've been talking about doing for some of these other issues about what can and cannot be done at this particular pond, for safety regulations. Does that sound?
yeah, I can throw a stab at it, and you guys can hack it up, that's fine.
Okay.
I just don't really understand, like, is it just this pond, or are we gonna let people
Well,
fish?
that's what I
higher
think
level.
we need to hammer out. I
Yeah.
don't think that we want to do it on every pond.
I mean, I'll write something as, like, maybe I would write it, and then you guys can go for it.
Okay, I think we need to talk about this a little bit further.
You got 3 more people to talk to.
Okay.
So, Carl, is Carl talking?
Hello, Carl Apple, Legacy. I've been here 14 years. I've been a club member since 2014. What I'd like to explain to you, if I might, is that the dock was built as a portable dock. We did have it up there for a short time, and it was tucked out of the way. Nobody knew it was even there. You couldn't even tell it was there. We had camouflage netting over it. And it was situated in a situation where it wasn't a problem with it being intrusive to people walking around. In any case, we were told to get it out of the way. We did that. In the interim, we've just gone on doing our thing for the past couple of years. We now feel that we have a board that might be able to help us get this dock to be able to use it. It is portable. It is one that we were going to gift to the Legacy community. What I was told was that Legacy would be responsible for taking care of it. Now that's fine, but who knows how to take care of it better than the person that built it. So that was my concern, was that if we're going to gift it to you and you say you're going to service it and take care of it, I think it would be better if the club itself serviced it and took care of it. Now we get back to, we're talking about legalities for this. If you're talking about people possibly slipping and falling, we have people that walk around the pond all the time with dogs. They get down close. They're in the same situation we are, only they have a dog that could pull them and get them in a situation where they might get hurt. We have people that go and pull out garbage down there. When you get close to the water, there is an embankment. That embankment is soft, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. That embankment can let go. So that's why we want an access to the water level that is non-intrusive. We can utilize it, excuse me, over and over again and not infringe on the embankment structure. We don't want to keep creating an embankment erosion. We get to that point where people come down and they watch us, and they tend to get close to the water too, not real close, but they get close to the water watching, and they have a grand time exposing. That too becomes an issue if you're talking about slip and fall. If we're talking about slip and fall, that can happen anywhere throughout this development. So if you're kind of looking at that, we haven't had a slip and fall over there, but the angle of the ground to the water is such that it gets slippery, and you have to really negotiate yourself getting down to the water. And that's all we're looking for, is for you to help us get something in place so that we don't have to deal with that in that regard.
Carl, can I ask a question?
Sure.
What's the material that the dock is made out of?
Right now, or aluminum?
Okay, that's what you have, okay. So it's not pressure treated or anything?
No, it's aluminum, folds up flat, about this big. It's 3.5 by 7.
So
size.
some of the things that I'm thinking that might help toward this is, we're concerned basically about liability.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if we had some signage saying, ponds are inherently dangerous and that proceed at your own risk or whatever. If the lawyer says that would absolve us somewhat of a certain amount of liability, would it be helpful if the board considered allowing your temporary or portable dock to be bungee strapped or chained to the back part of one of those benches? Because when you're not there, no one's gonna just sit at those benches, basically. If one of those benches, if you could just maybe keep that there, that's better than having Gary take it back and forth all the time. If it could be strapped to that, and then it's not in the way of lawnmowers and things like that. It's just something off the top of my head. Maybe that would be helpful. We're not averse to what you guys are doing. You're having fun. It's a community activity. We're just trying to make everything work without causing further problems. I mean, that's my thinking. That's my thinking.
Understood. Yes, and I would agree with that. And like I said, what we had when it was up there, we had it laying, if you're familiar with that spot, there's a hole in the ground just behind those seats. And that hole is just big enough for this thing to fit in. And like I said, we had camouflage material that the Army uses, and we covered it up. So you drove by, you didn't even know it was there.
It's an area where there's no mowing.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's one of those areas where they don't mow. It's,
Each impression by the big tree.
yeah. But if you wanted it chained up, or if you wanted it fastened in some way, that's not a problem. It's just, we felt that if it was down in the hole, it's out of sight, out of mind for the time being until it gets to be used.
See, the reason I think some of us are against the permanent dock would be that it might be construed as what they call an attractive nuisance.
Yeah, no, I
And
understand.
God forbid some grandkid sees that and goes down. I mean, and that could happen now, but, just trying to navigate through this to a way that is a positive outcome for everybody.
That's why we're here.
For the record, there is a sign on the approach to that pond that says, for radio control use only.
Oh, okay.
Use at your own risk. There is a sign out there.
Yeah, no swimming sign.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I don't think they go there alone.
Got one more person?
One more person?
All right. Terry.
Can I
Terry's
say
good.
something?
Sure.
On that holiday evening, I was launching boats for everybody down at the shore, so they didn't have to do this in the dark. I launched the boat, I turned, I missed the first step, I stumbled. That was the big accident.
Okay.
And in 14 years, that's the only thing. Our objective is to have this more accessible to us and other people. So don't stay home if you want to sail. We'll launch your boat for you and we'll pick it up. And if there's anybody out there who wants to give for this tremendous facility and pay for it, we'll be sure they get a nice brass plaque and put it on their name. Thank you.
So we have one more person sign up? Oh, in closing, and this is for people that are on Channel 17 also, is that we appreciate you sticking with us. I know it's been over 2 hours. This is the first workshop we've had for quite a long time. It's the first one for me. Hopefully if we have more, they'll be better. But this gives you an insight as to some of the things we talk about like every day that we have to hash through. And if any resident out there has any opinion whatsoever for, against, or anything about any of the topics that we discussed today, we do want to hear from you. We are your representatives, and it just helps Legacy when we hear from more people. So Feel free to email any of us.
All of us.
All of us, yeah. You know, the email addresses are on the website, Director 1, Director 2. If that's too complicated for you, email Josh, and Josh will get it to us. But we do want to hear from everybody's opinion, because sometimes the biggest challenge to a board is to try to get a good bead on everybody's opinion and not 2 or 3 or 4 people that are the loudest voice in the room at that time. We want to serve all 1,800 residents here, or how many we have. So thank you for being here today.
Question on the meetings?